Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in to another book review. And we've got a good one for you today. So today I'm reviewing Beauty Looks Down on Me by Eun Heekyung, translated by Sora Kim Russell. What happens to your sense of self when every room, screen, and conversation reminds you that your body is being judged? Set around a 30 something narrator who decides to diet after a lifetime of low self esteem and a history of being abandoned by his father, the story follows daily humiliations on buses, in shops, and at work. While friends and family doubt his efforts. So I will look at how Eun Hee-kyung turns small observations into a portrait of shame and persistence, and maybe ultimately a cautious kind of hope. And you can decide if you're going to put this on your reading list. So, hello everyone, I'm Barry. This is Seoul Book Club. And yes, so today I'm reviewing the title story from this collection. I haven't actually read the rest of the collection. There's 6 stories in this collection, and I'll try and read the rest of the story sometime. So I'm just reviewing the title story, and there's various different translators in this collection, but the title story, the one we're talking about, is translated by Sora Kim Russell, and the Korean title is 아름다움이 나를 멸신한다, and it was originally published in Korean in 2007. And this English translation has been published at least twice. First in 2008 in volume 2 of the Azalea Journal of Korean Literature and Culture, and then again in 2017 as a title story in this collection that I've got. So this was a collection of short stories by Eun Hee-kyung, and it was published as part of the Dalkey Archive Library of Korean Literature, and it was book 21 in that series. So Eun Hee-kyung is extremely popular here in Korea, and has at least I think about 6 short story collections and maybe four novels. And she's won a string of the big literary awards here in the country. However, she's not as well known to English readers as some of her contemporaries. So her main contemporaries are people like Shin Kyung-suk and Gong Ji-young. And of course, they've both had much more success in English translation. They have multiple novels translated into English, especially Shin Kyung-suk. But Eun Hee-kyung just doesn't have the same amount of works translated into English yet. So anyway, today's story, then, is a great entry point to Eun's work. And what is this story about? So Beauty, it tells the story of a young man, youngish man, struggling with weight loss and suffering from abandonment issues. So we have this young Korean man, and his daily life is haunted by shame about his body and this sting of others' judgments, the people around him, his co-workers, even just strangers he passes by on public transport and so on. And so, like I said at the beginning, this story was first published in 2007 in Korean, but it uncannily anticipates issues that have emerged over the age of social media. So it's been almost 2 decades, right, since the story was published, and so it seems like a very prescient story that anticipated a lot of issues which would get worse since it was published. And today, now 2025, or at any point over the last 10 years, every scroll through Instagram or Kakao Talk or Naver or Facebook or whatever can remind people, especially young people like my undergraduates at university, of how their looks compare to basically anyone anywhere else in the world. So I'm going to have to turn my fan on. There we go. And of course, this isn't a good thing, right? And so I'm sure many of us are aware now, the abundance of researchers and experts who've given warnings about social media's online image culture and how this is fueling these sort of body image struggles. And you also, of course, mental health problems that go with that as well, right? And that this problem has become significantly exacerbated. This is something that I definitely see evidence of in my classrooms. And in this story, the narrator's feelings of low self-esteem and anxiety and depression about his appearance, of course, we can very easily find echoes of this in any number of real-world studies and statistics on teens and adults in Korea and elsewhere, right? So I'll try and provide some examples of recent research from here in Korea, and some commentary on how social media affects body image and mental well-being, and examine how these insights align with some of the themes that Eun Heekyung's story anticipated. So bear in mind, though, that I'm not an expert on these topics or issues. So South Korea is often described as a lookism society. So it's a society deeply invested in physical appearance. And there is a communications professor, Shim Mi Sun, and she said that body shaming and lookism are so normalized in Korean media that many people don't even realize it's a problem. And she sort of goes on to say or talk about that, in daily life and on Korean social media, young people are just inundated. There's just a deluge of images of slim, sort of ultra polished K-pop idols and flawless influencers. It was the winter sort of fall festival at my university over the past couple of days, and on the one night, one of the K-pop bands was a girl group called Illit. And again, they just look exactly like this. They're these sort of impossibly sort of slim, uh, sort of good looking kind of young people, right? And so it's no surprise when you're sort of constantly surrounded by this kind of messaging and images that many people develop distorted perceptions of their own body. And there was a survey, a sort of national survey in Korea, not so long ago, and it found that 1 in 4 Korean teen girls of healthy weight believe they are overweight. And of course, this is a massive gap between reality and the perception of reality. And so this sort of body image distortion is extremely common, just alarmingly common. And in the same, so in another study, roughly half of Korean adolescents, male and female, show some kind of gap or mismatch between their actual body and how they think about it, right? And of course, this distortion is linked with unhealthy behavior, extreme dieting or eating disorders, and of course, mental health issues like depression and anxiety. So, social media, of course, amplifies all of these things, all of these pressures. And it's maybe particularly a problem in Korea because Korean teens are and young people and people in general are among the world's most active smartphone and SNS users. And so this means that they're just constantly comparing yourself to other people online, these sort of extremely well curated images of people looking at their best, right? And then there was a survey back in 2021. This was a government survey, a Korean government survey, and it said that 37% of Korean adolescents were at risk of smartphone over dependence. If anything, I think that should be that was probably more than 37%. Just anecdotally, just observations of moving through Seoul. I wouldn't be surprised if it was higher than that. And in another study, it said that a full but by 2020, 85.7% of Korean adolescents were on their phones at least 2 hours a day, and this was a jump from 64% 3 years earlier, right? So that's really, a lot of my students tell me their main thing these days, it's not even streaming or binging like something on Netflix. It's just the stories and the reels, right? That's like the main the main thing that I think they're doing when they're looking at social media, right? Um, that seems to be what a lot of people do. And so anyway, so we know, right, that these sort of image heavy or image focused social platforms, they just intensify this view of these sort of perfect ultra idealized bodies, right? And this drives people, especially young women, young girls, towards dissatisfaction with their own appearance. And then if you think about just the continuous exposure, just the daily exposure for however long you're just scrolling that feed of these, carefully curated selfies, the celebrity marketing photographs, and just how potentially warping that can be on your perception of what a normal body is, right? So it's very easy to understand how this could leave particularly young people who are more vulnerable to this kind of thing just feeling inadequate by comparison, right? And then maybe something that's specifically Korean is this: the Korea is a hyper competitive culture. Looking good is just seen as a key to success, right? And there's even a saying, your looks are your ability. Um, sort of sayings like that, right? And social media just sort of reaffirms this kind of idea, right? But the consequences for this on I'll get back to the story in a minute. Hold on. The consequences of all this on mental health, I think, are just increasingly obvious, right? And this sort of excessive kind of smartphone use, social media use, it is directly linked to higher stress, to lower self-esteem. And there's even studies that talk about the link between sort of suicide or suicidal thoughts among in Korean teenagers, right? Korean young people. There was another quite a big study, and it just comes to the obvious conclusions, right? That high smartphone use or dependency means you have significantly higher odds of having a distorted body image, and that's true for both girls and boys, right? And it's not just the screen time here, but just the dependence on social media for validation that harms your body confidence, right? And so all of these kind of things, right? And I'm sure we're all familiar seeing these studies or talked about in the news these days, right? But all of these findings, they align with what the protagonist in Eun's story experiences in a mostly pre-social media era, right? So 2007, that was really before, the massive explosion. So 2007, you maybe had Facebook. Was Facebook around in 2007? But it was before the massive explosion, right, in social media, Instagram, and these kind of things. And he even before that era, the character in Beauty Looks Down on Me, he is constantly evaluating himself through other people's eyes and feels, he says, judged by the world around him. And I think lots of people feel like that, right? You're constantly being judged. You're constantly being observed and found wanting by the world around you. And of course, now social media provides those eyes, those sort of judging eyes on just a massive, a global scale, essentially, right? So every photo that you post, or every social media thing that you put on your timeline or whatever, invites kind of commentary and kind of feedback from the world that can have an impact on your self worth, right? And there and I got a nice quote from Professor Shim where she says social media use by adolescents can lead to long-term exposure to unrealistic beauty standards and cause dissatisfaction with their own bodies, right? And the shame and appearance related stress that we have in Beauty Looks Down on Me, they have just sadly just become everyday emotions, I think, for a lot of young people and a lot of young Korean people. And we can take this even a little bit further. So South Korea is, I mean, ranks very high globally, maybe even number one in cosmetic procedures per capita in the population. And I saw one place. This might be a little out of date, but it was there are 13.5 surgeries per 1,000 people, and a lot of them are young adults and even teenagers. And that it's often seen as cosmetic surgery is seen often as a quick fix, right, for the insecurities that are made worse or exacerbated by the constant browsing of social media. There's even a trend. I don't know how if it maybe it's faded a little bit. There's a trend of parents gifting double eyelid surgery or even nose jobs to teenagers. Their teenage daughters, mainly, I guess, upon high school graduation. And a good time to do these kind of things is after high school and before starting university. And this type of thing is it's all about looking perfect, right, as sort of defined by Instagram or K dramas or K-pop music videos or something. And these things it's kind of connected with more broadly social acceptance, right? And there is, of course, there's pressure to conform to these kind of ideals. And then that again, it's sort of linked, it gets amplified by online comparisons. And then this results in depression and anxiety, right? It's not, it's very easy to see how it works, right? It seems pretty obvious now. And there was a big, it was much discussed, but there was a big pushback in Korea. I think it started around 2018. I think I might be wrong. And it was called the Escape the Corset movement. And this was lots of young Korean women were sort of publicly discarding makeup and rejecting these sort of strict beauty standards. And that was seen to be a reaction to the very real and genuine, mental or psychological toll of lookism. And as Professor Shim notes, uh, she writes that Koreans are often raised to treat extreme dieting or teen plastic surgery as normal, and says that normalizing such behavior obviously has a dark side. And this can lead to people thinking that obsessive self criticism is just a regular part of life. And then there's also the much sort of commented phenomenon of the advertisements in the Seoul subway and neighborhoods around subway stations, where a lot of them, especially in certain parts of town, are for plastic surgery clinics, and the slogans will be like, you too can be, beautiful and pretty and all the rest of it. And again, it's working on this sort of age-old marketing idea of you're not okay as you are, and it sort of makes you jealous of the version of you that has had this surgery. And this is just sort of feeds this kind of cycle of insecurity. And these things can be a very sensitive topic for many people, but this is exactly what Eun Heekyung is writing about and depicting in this young man's struggles with his weight and attempts at weight loss. So, like I said, this story predates the social media boom, but it eerily captures the emotional core, the emotional heart of these more modern findings. So, and this is the most compelling aspect of the story. So we get an insight into how he thinks about his weight, and that it's constantly something that he has to think about. So the protagonist here lives with this sort of constant body related shame and attendant low self-esteem. Much like the teens in those studies that Professor Shim and others have mentioned and discussed. And as he moves through his days in his office, on public transportation, in restaurants, or when he's with friends or family or co-workers in various situations, he says that he's constantly aware, or he's made to be constantly aware of his physical presence, and that he's judged by the world around him. And for example, he talks about the shame he feels using public transport. He says, "It was true that every time I took a seat on a bus, I was careful not to touch the person sitting next to me. Several times I'd been unable to bear the misunderstanding of some young woman and got off the bus before my stop." And then later, he talks about how challenging it is to shop for clothes. He says that what's far more uncomfortable is the fact that we can't do anything without being noticed. One of the major advantages of online shopping is that a fat person can shop for extra large clothes or a scale without feeling like everyone is staring at them. And so this is essentially just the offline, real world version of what young people now experience online, right? This feeling of being just perpetually judged. And, in the story, a stranger's like glance or like a dirty look, a glare on the bus can ruin the narrator's day. But today it'll be, a photo or not getting any likes on your selfie or something like that that might have a similar effect on someone's mood. And both of these things trigger this sort of sinking feeling of I'm not good enough in someone else's eyes, in the eyes of the world. And these details in the story are convincing and realistic, and I think they offer some genuine insight into the experience. And we see it's this slow accumulation of these, unwanted stares and comments and moments of shame that finally convince him to embark on his diet. So, how do his previously judgmental work colleagues and the world in general respond to him when he tries to lose weight? So, you would think that everybody would be supportive, right? Good for you. You can do it, kind of thing. And Un does a good job of showing what happens here, too. So, the world doesn't react kindly. Everyone doubts him. People don't understand why he's doing it. When he starts to only eat specific foods, people again judge him and they mock him, they mock his efforts, and he has to endure this too. We see how he becomes a topic of conversation and gossip in his office, right? With people speculating about whether he will succeed or not. And even his mother questions his motives, and she tries to tempt him with food that he's trying not to eat. And again, the challenge of that experience seems very real and quite nuanced, and it's very affecting. Anyway, I mentioned also at the beginning that the narrator is dealing with abandonment issues, right? So how does that aspect factor into the story? So the narrator is he's depressed and he's anxious and he's carried this since his youth, and it's partly due to being chubby and being teased, right? And like I said, so we know that negative body image in childhood is linked to depression, and that this can cast a long shadow into your adulthood. But we also learn at the beginning of the story that his father left him and his mother. His conception was probably a mistake, possibly the result of a one night stand, and his father, already married, eventually cuts ties with him and his mother. And for the narrator, this becomes connected to his weight. He's convinced that his father abandoned him because of his weight. He says, if I'd been one of those clever, innocent kids, he'd have been the tragic hero. But a fat kid who looks stupid and grumpy all the time could never amount to anything more than a reminder of his past mistake, his one moment of folly. And so his self-worth, his low self-worth, becomes sort of linked with these other traumas. He believes his father abandoned him because he was an unattractive fat kid, and he internalizes the idea that being overweight has made him unlovable. And so this is a very painful mindset, and again, it mirrors what I think many people might think in relation to their social media feed, right? Just this belief that maybe they don't match the ideal body or face, and as such, they don't deserve love or success. And it's that, it's exactly that kind of distorted thinking that I think, the mental health experts out there are concerned about. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, about 25% of normal weight Korean girls consider themselves fat. I know the story's about a guy, but this is a problem that I think goes, affects men and women, right? Boys and girls. So this isn't just a harmless misperception of yourself. This can lead to really intense feelings of shame and unguided dieting, and even worse, right? And so, the character in the story, he goes on this diet to escape the scorn of people around him. And in real life, we see young people resorting to similar measures, from whatever wacky or dangerous fad diet is popular, to all sorts of cosmetic procedures under similar, even now increasingly heightened social pressures. But this is very, in the story, I thought it was very sensitively and realistically depicted in the story. His abandonment issues and these feelings of antipathy towards his father are wrapped up with his low self-esteem. And in his determination to free himself from one of these issues, he perhaps frees himself from the other one too. So Eun Heekyung does offer a glimmer of hope and resilience in this story. So it is a dark tone, but the narrator's journey suggests that it is possible to reclaim one's self-esteem and move forward, even in a world that's fixated on appearances. And there are growing movements in Korea and elsewhere, promoting body positivity and mental health awareness. And I know lots of my students are aware of these things as well, right? It's very much something that is talked about and discussed, and they often have strong feelings and issues with this. And so there are lots of young people increasingly questioning this sort of Lucas culture. And like one of those, the Escape the Corset activists, they sort of famously said, "It's fine even if I'm not pretty. Corona 예쁘지 않아도 괜찮습니다." And this became kind of a rallying cry for various people. And on social media now, you'll see people maybe pushing back a little bit by sharing more candid photos and things like that. And a trend I've noticed among some of my students is they'll have an Instagram, but they won't really post any photos on it. um they'll maybe post like stories. The stories disappear, but the rest of their thing is just blank, it's empty. And so I think maybe that's also kind of a way of escaping some of this. So anyway, these kind of sort of counter narratives are still sort of emerging and being contested. But the story really here, it's the real battle is inside you, right? And overcoming that shame is difficult, but potentially transformative. And so these are, I think, very important issues, like the impact of social media on body image, mental health. It's quite a complex issue, but I think becoming clear, but has come into focus over the past few years. Still a very urgent issue, I would argue. But it's also things that, this story was 2007, right? And so I think Eun Hee-kyun sort of intuited presciently, what was coming, right? And certainly anticipated some of these things. And the South Korean experience with these sort of intense beauty standards, amplified by social media, by the internet, this is kind of a cautionary tale, right? What happens when society's gaze just doesn't let up, right? And of course, the West is, sort of grappling with the same problems. You've got people like Jonathan Haidt talking about his book, The Anxious Generation. There was the other writer, Jean. Oh gosh, what was her name? Who did Jen? Who was that? Right, I forget. Anyway, but there's lots of writers now that have talked about these things, right? Soaring depression, all of these kind of things, right? And during COVID as well, when there were lockdowns in the UK, there was lots of articles about how this exacerbated young people's social media use and so on, right? So this is a massive area, a massive topic. But the basic point is, when every room that you go into, or every screen that you look at, makes you feel judged, you kind of suffer for this negatively, right? And Eun Heekyung's story shines a light on the sort of personal damage of these kind of judgments, right? So over two decades later, I think maybe more of us were beginning to confront the broader toll of these things. And I guess if there's a takeaway from this, it's that we have to find ways to foster healthier self-image, online and offline. That we don't have to live under this tyrannical gaze of beauty looking down on us all the time, right? So it is a dark story, but like I said, not without hope, and ultimately shows it is possible to move on from things, even if they scar us when we're very young. I thought it was very sensitive, very nuanced depiction of someone who's unhappy with their appearance and the difficult struggle that you go through for self-improvement. And anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm sorry if I waffled a little bit. But anyway, I'm going to try and read the rest of the collection sometime. I think this is actually the only Eun Hee-kyung story that I've read. So, and I did like it a lot. So I will try and read the rest of this collection sometime. But anyway, if you've read any Eun Hee-kyung, let me know in the comments. And thanks for watching. If you have any recommendations, let me know, and take care, and I'll see you next time.